in the shady wilderness, where the ancient forest intertwines with the darkness of night, there is a village lost in time. This village, surrounded by dense thickets, witnessed a strange and mystical ritual that shaped its inhabitants into lords of fear. When a battered wanderer named Edward invaded this corner of the world, his fate was unexpectedly intertwined with the dark secret of the village. His footsteps sounded like a verdict when the locals, as if anticipating his approach, greeted him with cold smiles and impenetrable glances. With the coming of night, when the last rays of the day had gone into the evening darkness, the inhabitants of the village gathered around the ancient altar, lost in the dense bushes. The crown of this altar was made up of bones and black fabrics soaked in the smell of ancient rituals. Edward, illuminated only by the light of a distant campfire, witnessed a creepy ritual where cannibalism became the key to a new life. As the members of the community fell into a trance, their bodies, washed by the shadows of the night, became masters of the dark forces that fed on human flesh. Edward, however, could not take his eyes off the ancient altar where this eerie ritual took place. It was at this moment that he realized that he had become a part of something deeper and more terrible than he could have imagined. When the ritual came to an end, Edward was introduced to the house of one of the villagers. The house, which seemed ordinary from the outside, turned out to be a repository of darkness. Its walls were covered with drawings depicting previous rituals. Eerie shadows danced across these walls like a horror chronicle come to life. That evening, the ceremony was repeated, and Edward, becoming a part of this nightmare, realized that his fate was now intertwined with an ancient cult. He became an ingredient in this dark potion, which provided the villagers with life extension. Every look, every groan of his suffering was an inspiration to this dark community. However, at the most terrifying moment, when Edward felt that his life would soon be swallowed up by the altar, something unexpected happened. The shadows around him began to pulse, as if being repelled by an unknown force. The altar, which had recently been a living witness to the ceremony, crumbled to dust, and the shadows of the village began to dissolve, as if carried away by the wind. Edward, numb with surprise, freed himself from the shackles of this nightmare. However, where the village once stood, there was now only an empty expanse, devoid of shadow and evil. It turned out that the dark energy that had been consuming souls and bodies for centuries had been released. From that day on, Edward witnessed the uprising of his village from the captivity of darkness. He decided to hit the road to prevent similar disasters in other parts of the world, and his heart was filled with determination to resist the dark forces that could engulf even the most peaceful corners. I heard this story from a colleague at work. It happened a long time ago in one of the Transbaikal villages. An elderly man lived in a hut on the border with the forest. He wasn't from around here. It was rumored that he was a retired military man, and someone gossiped about him as a KGB Chekist from Moscow itself. However, having acquired a house in these parts, the man quietly and peacefully engaged in his household. One winter, he suddenly disappeared somewhere. You can't see him on the street. There's no smoke coming from the chimney. His neighbor decided to check if everything was okay with him and went to his house. The doors to the hut were not locked, and the neighbor got inside. There, right on the floor, lay the torn, eaten, and already decomposing corpse of this man. The police were called. The situation was strange. It seemed that the unfortunate man had been devoured by a wild beast from the forest that had entered the dwelling. The locals began to ask if the murdered owner kept a large dog or a tamed wolf in the house, but everyone denied it. The only thing that has been established for sure is that someone visited the deceased before his death. There were 2 vodka glasses on the table and 2 plates with a half-eaten snack. It was suggested that perhaps the visitor did not come alone, but with his large dog. For example, a shepherd. It is possible that there was a quarrel between the men, and the guest set his dog on the owner. However, this version was hard to believe. Even if the guest had let his dog loose on the man with the intention of killing him, he certainly would not have let him cannibalize. It was hypothesized that the mentally ill visitor himself turned out to be a cannibal, but the crime was never solved. Fingerprints on the dishes did not give the necessary clues. No one saw suspicious outsiders.